In 1989, a female Marine captain disappeared from her quarters without a trace. Known for her exemplary conduct, her colleagues found it hard to believe that she'd gone AWOL. Military authorities suspected she'd fallen victim to foul play. The FBI joined the investigation. They would find the decorated officer or bring her assailant to justice.
Shirley Russell was a determined woman, determined enough to reach the rank of captain in the United States Marine Corps. When this decorated officer turned up missing, her colleagues refused to believe she'd gone AWOL. It was unclear whether Captain Shirley Russell was dead or alive. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. When a crime is committed on a military installation, it falls under federal jurisdiction. Agents would have to rely on their dedication and instinct to solve the mystery of her disappearance.
The Marine Corps base at Quantico, Virginia, is located 35 miles south of Washington, D.C. Since 1917, it has been headquarters to one of the nation's most selective branches of the military. Over 3,000 Marines train, work, and live on the 100-square-mile base. Nearly everything in civilian life is mirrored on base, from department stores to housing. Married officers have the option of living on base in married officers' quarters, which are known as MOQs. For 6 months, MOQ number 394D was the home of Captain Shirley Gibbs Russell and her husband, Robert Russell. By January 1989, Captain Russell decided to end the marriage. For the next month, she would stay with a friend off base until bachelor's housing was available. Shirley packed her civilian clothes, her uniforms, and her Marine-issue firearm. Robert begged her to stay, but Shirley was determined. For her, the move was final. For Robert, the separation meant he had to move off base. As a former Marine, he would be losing his last tie to the Corps. Captain Russell continued to advance in her career as the adjutant to the commanding officer of the support battalion at the Marine Basic School. She was in charge of all personnel matters and administrative needs of the support battalion. She was known as a dedicated Marine by her peers and by her commanding officer, Lieutenant Colonel James Hodges.
When I first met Shirley Russell, I was very impressed with the fact that she was a black female captain, because we just don't have that many in the Marine Corps, and that she had come from a poor background and was making something of herself, and she seemed so energized and so eager to keep moving up the rank structure.
Captain Russell?
While assigned together, they built a friendship based on mutual respect.
I can't talk to you right now. Now is not a good time.
Hodges knew that Shirley's marriage was in trouble.
I'll have to talk to you later.
My relationship with Shirley Russell was very special, even though that I was her commanding officer and her ultimate boss, if you will. I was very close to her as sort of a big brother mentor. And we talked sometimes, after working hours about her situation, her marriage, her past, and so forth.
Thank you, sir.
On Thursday, March 2nd, about a month after her split with Robert, Shirley requested leave from work. She needed to clean her former quarters and finalize her legal separation. 4 days later, on Monday, March 6th, Hodges arrived at the office expecting to find Shirley at her desk. He was surprised to find her office empty. Shirley had a perfect work record. She had never been late to report.
And when I walked in the door, I asked Major Buck Bourgeois right away, and I said, "Where's Shirley?" And he said, "Sir, she's not here." And instantly, I felt like, oh no, something has happened to her.
Lieutenant Colonel Hodges investigated the unauthorized absence. Captain Russell had recently moved into bachelor officers' quarters on base. Hodges hoped he would find her at home.
Captain Russell. Captain Russell. Open the door, Corporal, please, sir.
As the missing captain's commanding officer, Hodges had authorization to search the room.
Captain Russell.
There was no sign of her, and no indication she had moved out.
Lock up, Corporal. Yes, sir.
The Marines returned to the office and contacted the captain's husband, who now lived off base. Hodges knew that Robert Russell had helped Shirley clean and paint their vacated quarters over the weekend. They arranged to meet at the couple's former MOQ. The Marine officers inspected the residence. Russell told them that he and Shirley had met here around noon on Saturday to do some touch-up painting.
Sorry.
According to Russell, Shirley volunteered to buy some paint from the base exchange at about 1:30. He claimed that she didn't take her car, but walked to the PX instead. Russell said he hadn't seen her since.
She went to get more paint.
Lieutenant Colonel Hodges didn't believe Robert Russell's story.
It hit me as just totally a lie because the PX was probably 4 or 5 miles away. And there's no way in the world that she would have walked to the PX from their quarters.
Outside the quarters, the officers also inspected Russell's storage shed. On the floor, Colonel Hodges noticed a rust-colored stain. Russell dismissed it as paint. Hodges was skeptical. He was no expert, but to him, it looked like blood. Lieutenant Colonel Hodges briefed the Naval Investigative Service. The NIS reported the possibility of a crime to the FBI's Washington field office. The NIS briefed special agents on the case. Captain Russell had been missing for 3 days. With no indication of her whereabouts, the agents followed standard procedure. Special Agent Alan Malinchak headed the case.
When you have somebody missing, you either have a case of an abduction, you have a case of a missing person, somebody who's walked away for whatever reason, or you have foul play. So the initial investigation that the FBI was involved in ran all 3 of those investigative lines.
Mr. Russell?
According to standard procedure, the missing woman's husband, Robert Russell, was the first to be questioned.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
He told agents that he was talking with a neighbor around 1:30 the afternoon of Shirley's disappearance, when a friend of hers stopped by to pick her up for lunch. At 3:30, Robert said he called her bachelor officer's quarters to see if she had gone home. The duty clerk had not seen Captain Russell, so Robert left a message. Around 4 p.m., Robert borrowed his housemate's car and drove to Pennsylvania to spend the weekend with his parents.
feel personally threatened by this, or did your wife feel
During the
personally
first interview that I had with Robert Russell, he was very calm, very businesslike, wanted to assist the FBI in the investigation, and provided me with multiple locations of where Shirley might be, who she may be associated with, what could have happened.
Midnight phone calls.
Russell thought it was possible someone had abducted or harmed her. Though Shirley had no enemies, the couple had experienced some trouble due to their interracial marriage. Russell told agents he and his wife frequently visited his hometown near Mahanoy City, Pennsylvania. One afternoon, while shopping, the Russells were harassed by racists. According to her husband, Shirley had been frightened, but another incident scared her even more. An unidentified man had called their house on base.
Hello?
The caller used racial epithets and threatened to harm the couple.
How'd you get my number?
Whoever the caller was knew where the Russells lived. After the threatening phone calls, Robert told officials he felt Shirley might need protection for the times he couldn't be with her. At a pawn shop near base, Robert picked out a .25 caliber Raven semi-automatic just 2 days before Shirley disappeared.
Hey, got your pan?
It's about time.
Russell told agents he surprised Shirley with a gift on the day they met to clean their former quarters.
I want you to be safe.
According to Russell, Shirley was appreciative of the pearl-handled weapon.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Agents were suspicious of the story. As a Marine captain, Shirley already had a personal sidearm. If she felt unsafe, why would she need another gun? With Shirley and the gun nowhere to be found, that question would be difficult to answer. Marine Captain Shirley Gibbs Russell had vanished from base housing on March 4th, 1989. Her husband was the last person to have seen her. Agents needed to corroborate his story. The FBI interviewed Marine Captain Patrice Gale. According to Robert Russell, on the day Shirley disappeared, Captain Gale had arrived at Shirley's former residence to pick her up for lunch at about 1:30. Gale confirmed this. Robert also told her that Shirley had gone for paint and hadn't returned.
But she ran out of paint.
Captain Gale thought this was odd.
Okay, that's probably a good idea.
Shirley never missed appointments. And this one had been especially important. Just a day earlier, Gale had accompanied Shirley to the base legal office to pick up her separation papers. Shirley planned to present them to Robert the day they painted their former quarters. This would make their separation official, and Shirley worried about Robert's reaction. Afterwards, she would need a friend to talk to and ask Captain Gale to meet her. When Shirley failed to show up, Captain Gale worried that Robert had done something to her friend.
She said what peaceful. She said what peaceful.
FBI agents checked Shirley's bachelor officer's quarters. The clerk had not seen her since Saturday, March 4th, the day she disappeared. On that same Saturday, Corporal Dan Caraway confirmed that Robert Russell had called, looking for his wife. The corporal noted the time in his logbook as 3:30 p.m. About a half hour after he took the message, Caraway thought he saw Captain Russell. She was talking on the telephone. He recalled that she was wearing jeans and a maroon sweater. He wanted to give her the message that her husband had called, but he was distracted. By the time Caraway was free, the woman he thought was Captain Shirley Russell was gone. His description contradicted Robert Russell's statement that Shirley had been wearing a blue jogging outfit. The corporal also only saw the woman from behind. He never got a good look at her face. Agents doubted if she ever returned to her apartment. They found no trace that Shirley had changed her clothes or brought back the separation papers. Investigators questioned Russell's old neighbors. One of them said she saw a blue station wagon backed up to the Russell shed on the day Shirley had disappeared. She noted the time was 5 p.m. This was an hour later than Russell claimed he left for Pennsylvania. Investigators wondered if Robert Russell was mistaken or lying. Agent Alan Malinchek called the FBI in Pennsylvania to pin down Russell's whereabouts the rest of that day. Special Agent Michael Quirk of the Allentown office became co-case agent. He contacted Robert's parents.
Robert Russell had traveled to St. Clair, Pennsylvania on March 4th, 1989, and he stayed with his family the weekend of March 4th, March 5th.
FBI interviews with Russell's family confirmed he had arrived alone. None of them had seen Shirley. The FBI launched a media campaign seeking the public's help. Captain Shirley Gibbs Russell's photo was featured in television and newspaper stories. Leads began to pour in. Midway between Quantico and Robert Russell's hometown, a clerk in York, Pennsylvania, called federal authorities. The clerk reported that a young black woman had been in the store on the afternoon of Saturday, March 4th, the day Captain Shirley Gibbs Russell disappeared from Quantico. According to the clerk, the woman bought several items and paid with a check. The clerk asked the woman for identification. She produced a military ID card. She resembled photos the clerk had seen in the newspaper.
Do you mind if I look at your bank receipts?
The agent asked to see the checks received on that day.
If I've seen the receipts? Sure. Okay.
He found that none of them were written by Shirley Gibbs Russell. Assistant U.S. Attorney Lawrence Leiser worked with the FBI on the case. He noted another detail that suggested the woman in the store was not Captain Russell.
The color of the ID and the location of the picture in the ID described as belonging to Shirley Russell was the ID of a dependent military person, not of an active duty military person.
There had been no activity since March 4th in Captain Russell's bank or credit card accounts, nor had she called her family or friends. Considering Shirley's stable character, her disappearance didn't make sense to Agent Alan Malinchek.
She was the type of person who was going to do very well in the Marine Corps. She would be promoted. She had that capability. She was sharp. She was squared away. She easy to make friends. Everybody that worked with her liked her. She had a lot of stability in her life with regard to church and family. For her to just disappear of her own accord just didn't make any logical sense.
With no word from her or a kidnapper, agents believed it was likely that Captain Shirley Gibbs Russell was dead. They were now searching for her body. Dozens of Marines fanned out across the huge base. They searched hundreds of acres of dense woods the Marines used for training. They found no trace of the missing captain. Perhaps Robert Russell knew more about his wife's disappearance than he was telling the FBI.
Quantico Marine Base.
Agents asked him to submit to a polygraph examination.
Lieutenant Colonel Hodges states,
He agreed.
that the last time you saw her, you were painting your quarters, and it was sometime prior to 3 p.m. on Saturday, March 4th?
That's correct.
As before, agents found him to be cool and cooperative. For almost 3 hours, Robert Russell answered dozens of questions relating to Shirley's whereabouts.
Mr. Russell, could you advise me where you...
He was subjected to 3 separate exams.
Was this red spot paint, Mr. Russell?
Yes, it was.
Each time, Robert Russell was found to be deceptive. When agents told him the results, Russell seemed unfazed, almost smug.
Just to exclude you from any evidence we found.
He even consented to be fingerprinted. Perhaps he was aware that polygraphs were inadmissible in a federal court of law. Without a body, agents would need something stronger than a hunch to prove that Russell had killed his wife and disposed of her. In the spring of 1989, the FBI continued to hunt for the body of Marine Captain Shirley Gibbs Russell. In their search for answers, agents delved deeper into the background of their prime suspect, her husband, Robert Russell. Special Agent Michael Quirk learned that Russell was already married before he met Shirley. He had 2 children with his first wife, Pam. The marriage only lasted 6 years. In 1986, Russell told his wife that he wanted a divorce. He left Pam and their children on Christmas Day. 6 months later, Robert married Shirley while they were both stationed at Parris Island, South Carolina. The FBI learned that Shirley was transferred to Quantico a short time later. They also learned that Robert told friends that the distance was hurting his marriage. He claimed he was leaving the Marine Corps to join Shirley in Quantico in order to stabilize their relationship. But agents discovered a different motive for the move. Agents believed it was unlikely Robert would voluntarily relinquish his rank as captain. Being in the Marine Corps was Robert's whole life and whole world. Military records showed that in February of 1988, while stationed at Gulfport, Mississippi, Robert's superiors found that his passion for the Corps did not seem to apply to its regulations. They issued Robert a less than honorable discharge for dereliction of duty and defrauding the government. He was escorted out of his office and was prohibited from taking anything with him except his own clothing. Although Robert was no longer a Marine, he moved into officers' quarters at Quantico based on Shirley's rank of captain. While Shirley supported him, Robert tried to get his life back on track by becoming a teacher at a nearby high school. But his drinking started to become excessive. He was getting drunk more often and staying out later.
Robert?
Shirley was distraught. She joined Al-Anon, a support group for the loved ones of alcoholics. When Robert became physically abusive, Shirley finally left him.
Don't touch me.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Lawrence Leiser believed that Robert's problems left Shirley few alternatives.
She realized the marriage was going nowhere, began to get counseling from a local counseling center that was made available to members of the Marine Corps. She also consulted with a Navy lawyer to begin the divorce process.
To investigators, Russell's instability and abusive behavior reinforced their belief that he was capable of killing Shirley.
His personality could not tolerate the fact that this black woman, his wife, was a Marine Corps captain who was successful, who was succeeding in her career, and to top it all off, wanted to divorce him.
Agents learned that during her separation, Shirley had sought refuge off base with her close friend, fellow Marine Captain Ann Mack. Captain Mack told Agent Malinchek that Shirley was afraid of her husband. She intended to leave him, but needed a place to stay.
She had asked Captain Ann Mack if she could stay with her at her townhome in the Springfield, Virginia area, and Captain Ann Mack agreed and laid out some ground rules about Bob Russell not being there, not coming into the house, nothing like that whatsoever.
But it was not enough to keep Robert away from Shirley. Mack was worried about her. Mack told investigators that Robert was stalking Shirley. On several occasions, he showed up at the house early in the morning as Shirley was leaving. He harassed his wife until she agreed to spend some time with him. Mack said that Robert Russell was living off base. He had moved in with one of his new colleagues. An FBI agent checked the address. It was the home of Sandy Flint. Sandy Flint offered little. She said she knew nothing about Robert's missing wife. On the way out, the agent met Robert Flint, Sandy's father-in-law. He was a retired painter who had worked at the base at Quantico for 10 years. Mr. Flint told the agent about a conversation he had with Robert Russell 2 days after Shirley's disappearance.
Robert Russell asked him how to clean up stains from concrete floors. And the father-in-law had told Bob Russell that you could just use chlorine or soap and water and that would pretty much clean it up or dilute it. And Bob had asked him, well, what if it's blood? And the father-in-law had said, well, you could use muriatic acid.
Mr. Flint told the agent something else of interest. Sandy and her husband had recently separated. He suspected Sandy was now having an affair with Robert Russell. With each new person agents interviewed, they found more deception from Robert Russell. If Sandy was indeed involved with Russell, she might know if he had killed Shirley. Agents would inform her it would be unwise to obstruct a federal murder case. Sandy agreed to speak with the FBI. This time, agents found her to be far more cooperative. She described her role in Robert Russell's obsession.
She had admitted to having an intimate affair with Bob Russell while Bob Russell was still married. She advised us that she, at Bob's request, she had surveilled Shirley Russell. She could report to Bob Shirley's activities and whereabouts.
He enlisted her as his spy. Sandy told the FBI Russell was convinced that Shirley was having an affair. He wanted to know where Shirley went and who she met. Sandy followed her everywhere, but found nothing to support his delusional fixation.
And he was so compulsive, he wanted to catch his wife cheating. Of course, the irony of all of this is she wasn't cheating at all. It was he who was cheating on her.
Robert was too far gone for logic. He refused to believe the assurances of his mistress. In his own mind, if he was cheating, so was Shirley. And he would go to any length to prove it. He told Sandy that he broke into his wife's car and planted a voice-activated recorder. When it failed to record anything incriminating, he decided he needed to get closer. Robert broke into Ann Mack's house to bug Shirley's bedroom. What happened next told Sandy that her lover's obsession had completely consumed him. Robert called his mistress from his wife's bedroom, speaking in a whisper.
You won't believe where I'm at.
He told Sandy he was drinking Shirley's wine and reading her journal.
Sitting on her bed. In that bar.
Then he said something she would never forget.
He had informed her that if Shirley comes missing, it'll be me. I'll have taken care of her. And she had said, "We can't do that. They're going to look for her." He says, "And if anybody questions you on this, deny it. Don't even admit to the conversation we're having now."
Sandy's statements were incriminating, but it was her word against his. To corroborate her story, the FBI needed physical evidence.
We requested a consent search of Captain Ann Mack's residence and retrieved several items, and some of those items, one was a telephone and one was a wine glass. And when we sent those to the FBI laboratory for analysis, we were able to develop Robert Russell's fingerprints on those items.
The FBI now had its first piece of physical evidence to corroborate that Robert Russell obsessively stalked his wife. But without Shirley's body, it was still not enough to charge him with murder. In March of 1989, there was little evidence to link Robert Russell to the murder of his wife, Marine Captain Shirley Gibbs Russell. Early in the investigation, agents learned the suspect had been having an affair with Sandy Flint. Flint now told the FBI more about the day Shirley Gibbs Russell disappeared. She said Robert Russell had borrowed her car, a blue station wagon, to drive to his parents' house in Pennsylvania. She remembered he left her house sometime after 4 p.m. Sandy thought this was strange because he could have used his own pickup truck. Assistant U.S. Attorney Lawrence Leiser believed Russell borrowed her car that day to transport Shirley's body to Pennsylvania.
The reason he asked to use that car was because he had an open bed pickup truck. The body was still in the storage shed, and he had to dispose of the body. And he couldn't do it in an open bed pickup truck, so he borrowed the closed station wagon of his girlfriend to dispose of the body.
Agents hoped to substantiate this theory. They returned to Russell's former residence, where his neighbor had seen the same blue station wagon backed up to his shed. Investigators needed to take a closer look at the floor, where Lieutenant Colonel Hodges had seen the rust-colored stain. But the stain was gone, at least on the surface.
And as they were chiseling the whitewashed pieces of the concrete up, Bob Russell had asked them what's going on, and they had told him that they're taking these samples to determine what the substance is on the concrete. And Mr. Russell had voluntarily told them, well, I had cleaned that up with some muriatic acid.
The FBI lab confirmed that muriatic acid was present on the concrete. The same substance that Mr. Flint had suggested Russell use to remove blood from cement. Technicians found no trace of blood or paint on the chips. What could have been a key piece of forensic evidence had been destroyed. Agents hoped Sandy Flint's car would reveal more. FBI examiners scoured the station wagon inside and out. It was unusually clean for an older car that had so recently made a round trip from Virginia to Pennsylvania. It turned out to be another dead end. As the investigation stalled in Virginia, Robert Russell split up with Sandy, packed his things, and moved to Pennsylvania to start a new life. The FBI's investigative focus turned north as well. Agents followed Robert's every move. They observed that while he relied on his parents for support, he was very close to his brothers, Mike and Ron. Agents approached the brothers on several occasions. Mike Russell agreed to meet with agents. He told them that the day after Robert arrived in Pennsylvania following Shirley's disappearance, Robert took Sandy Flint's station wagon to a nearby car wash. Robert and his brother thoroughly cleaned the inside of the car, vacuuming it and spraying it with deodorizer. Agents believed Robert's actions demonstrated his intent to remove any evidence that Shirley's body had been in the car. Mike Russell told agents he never saw a body. He did concede that his brother's behavior had seemed desperate since Shirley left him. 2 months before she disappeared, Mike and his older brother Ron drove to Virginia to take away Robert's guns. Agent Quirk recalled that his brothers felt this was necessary to prevent Robert from hurting someone.
He was depressed in the fact that he was no longer in the Marine Corps, that he loved the Marine Corps. He didn't have money. He was a captain in the Marine Corps. Now he's a special education teacher. Shirley had removed him from her checking account, so he was having problems financially.
Circumstantial evidence was mounting, but the FBI lacked one crucial piece of evidence for their case: Shirley Gibbs Russell's body. The first question was where to look. Agents learned the answer from Robert Russell's first wife, Pam. Robert's boyhood home was in Schuylkill County, a rural, mountainous region in northeastern Pennsylvania. Thousands of coal mines, mostly abandoned, are scattered throughout the rugged county. Some are hundreds of feet deep and partially filled with water. As a young man, suspect Robert Russell had spent much of his time hiking and hunting in the region. His family said he knew the place like the back of his hand. A search conducted in this terrain would be daunting, but nobody ever questioned whether it should be done. 150 people participated in the extensive ground search for Shirley Gibbs Russell in early May. Volunteers from the FBI, the Marines, the Naval Investigative Service, and the Pennsylvania State Police participated. None of them were more eager to find the missing Marine than her own peers from the United States Marine Corps. 9 helicopters and 6 transport trucks filled with Marines were deployed. Over 3 days, they searched 2,000 acres of land. They never found Captain Russell's body. Agents would soon develop a theory as to why the search was not more fruitful. Agent Quirk learned about a strange phone call Ron Russell received from his brother Robert.
Robert had asked Ron if he could get him some dynamite. And Robert had stated that he couldn't get dynamite at Quantico because it was too expensive. And Ron had asked Robert, why do you want dynamite? And Robert's response was, I want to blow up Shirley.
Ron never bought it, but agents now wondered whether Robert Russell had thrown Shirley's body into a mine shaft, then sealed her grave with an explosion. The search did yield one surprising result. an agent found what appeared to be the grip of a gun handle. It was sent to the Firearms and Tool Marks Unit at the FBI's lab in Washington, D.C. for analysis. By comparing the samples to hundreds of other guns, examiners determined that it was consistent with the grip of a .25 caliber Raven semi-automatic. It was the same type of gun Robert Russell had purchased from a pawn shop on March 2nd, 2 days before his wife disappeared. Unfortunately, the tantalizing discovery would not help with the prosecution. Agents never found Robert's fingerprints on the gun part. To prosecutors, it looked as if the ex-Marine had covered his tracks well. Without a murder weapon or a body, it would be next to impossible to convict Robert Russell of murder.
Very clear.
After an investigation spanning 2 months, 2 states, and thousands of man-hours, the FBI was no closer to arresting their prime suspect, Robert Russell, for the murder of his wife, Marine Captain Shirley Gibbs Russell. Though agents had gathered a significant amount of circumstantial evidence, Assistant U.S. Attorney Lawrence Leiser didn't have enough physical evidence to prosecute Russell for the crime.
We didn't have a body, we didn't have eyewitnesses, we didn't have weapon, and it just took a tremendous amount of investigative skill and effort to put the pieces together, to go out and search out the leads, tremendous amount of hours and energy that these FBI agents took to gather the evidence.
Authorities didn't even have enough evidence to make an arrest. Agents were frustrated, as were the hundreds of Marines whose lives had been touched by Captain Shirley Russell.
It was like the loss of a child or a dear friend, and there was nothing you could do about it. And what frustrated me so much was she was so close to being extricated from her bad marriage. And for her to be killed, it still bothers me to this day. I mean, it's just one of those things that you just never really totally get over.
It looked as if Robert Russell was going to get away with murder. But Russell's past indiscretions would come back to haunt him.
We had been contacted by the Naval Investigative Service at Gulfport, Mississippi, that there was some evidence in a locker there that they had maintained from when Bob was discharged from the Marine Corps. And so they sent it to us, and it turned out to be a floppy disk.
It had been confiscated when Russell was relieved of duty in Mississippi, a year before Shirley Russell disappeared. For security reasons, no service member who has been relieved of duty is allowed to go through their documents after dismissal. One of Russell's former superiors found the disc and read its menu of contents.
One of those items that he saw on the menu was the word murder. And he pushed the mouse for that, on that word murder, and up came 26 steps, very detailed and elaborate steps on how Robert Peter Russell was planning the murder of Captain Shirley Gibbs.
Russell's plan clearly documented his intentions.
The 26 steps was a very revealing piece of evidence because it showed the man's state of mind, his willingness to even contemplate murdering another human being, let alone his wife. Step 1 is leave Thursday, January 18th for Paris Island. Well, who was at Paris Island? Shirley Russell. Make it look as if she left. Well, that's exactly what he tried to do when he did murder his wife. And then the last thing he says is blame it on her own kind, obviously referring to her race. This is a man who clearly had the mental wherewithal and intent and motivation to do this kind of act.
On February 8th, 1991, The computer file convinced federal prosecutors to bring charges against Robert Peter Russell for the murder of his wife, Captain Shirley Gibbs Russell. Ironically, Russell was arrested in a prison.
Need your stuff with us?
He had recently taken a job as a substance abuse counselor at Pennsylvania's Graterford State Correctional Institution.
York, got a jacket.
But prosecution would not be easy.
Right here.
Let's go make some notes.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Lawrence Leiser would have to assemble all the pieces of circumstantial evidence like a mosaic. Hopefully, the jury would see the portrait of a killer emerge.
Let's see what we got here.
Assistant U.S. Attorney and co-prosecutor Michael Rich would help to prepare the case against Russell.
It was clear that we were going to have to make it on, circumstantial evidence. A lot of that circumstantial evidence was as a result of what Bobby Russell had been saying and doing since his wife's disappearance in 1989. So the plan was to assemble all that into some sort of coherent scheme and present that.
Never before had the federal government attempted to try someone for first-degree murder based solely on circumstantial evidence. At trial, the prosecution asserted that Robert Russell intended to commit murder when he bought the .25 caliber Raven semi-automatic on March 2nd.
Sweet, how much?
Several of his co-workers reported that he had told them a .25 caliber is a perfect weapon. It leaves little evidence behind. He said there's virtually no blood spatter, and the bullet usually lodges in the body. On Saturday, March 4th, when Shirley gave him the separation papers, he refused to sign. Just after noon that day, the prosecution believed Robert Russell snuck up on Shirley in the shed. He had to wait for nightfall before he could remove the body. To establish an alibi, he talked with a neighbor and lied to Shirley's friend about his wife walking to the base exchange to buy paint.
Okay, that's probably a good idea. See.
Around 4 p.m., he went to Sandy Flint's house and borrowed her station wagon. After night fell, he wrapped Shirley's body in a tarp and placed it in the back of the car. Their neighbors saw it backed up to the shed. He then drove 4 hours to St. Clair, Pennsylvania with the body in the back of the car. Once there, he knew exactly where to go. There were hundreds of abandoned mines to choose from. Then, Robert Russell, who had once sworn to uphold honor as a member of the Marine Corps, dumped his wife's body into a mine shaft. He threw dynamite in to bury the evidence under thousands of pounds of rock. The jurors were convinced. On May 3rd, 1991, Robert Peter Russell was convicted of murdering his wife, Shirley Gibbs Russell. Robert Russell was sentenced to life. There is no parole in the federal system. He will never leave prison alive. On a highway in Northern Virginia, a brazen daytime shooting of employees from the Central Intelligence Agency stunned the country. The FBI were called in. But the nationwide search quickly became a far-reaching international manhunt. Agents hoped that after years of investigation, a daring operation halfway around the world would put an end to the global pursuit.
In Langley, Virginia, a terrorist fired into rush hour traffic. The victim seemed randomly selected, but the motive appeared to be political, targeting employees of the Central Intelligence Agency. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The FBI quickly became involved in the investigation, processing more than 2,000 leads and crossing an ocean in the effort to deliver justice.
Langley, Virginia, a suburb of Washington, D.C., is home to the headquarters of the Central Intelligence Agency. Monday, January 25th, 1993. Another work week had started for thousands of CIA employees who routinely commute to their jobs at America's Global Intelligence Agency. Workers of varying security clearance and experience waited at the long light to turn left into the CIA compound. All were alone in their cars, except a young couple who had met at the CIA and had recently been married. As newlyweds, they seemed to have their entire life ahead of them. Then the young man was struck from behind by a gunman's bullet. Two employees behind the shooter fled from their vehicles as the man walked forward. A third employee sped off before he could fire. Two more ran the red light as their cars were peppered by bullets. The gunman then shot into a sixth car, hitting the 61-year-old man twice at point-blank range. Behind that car, the shooter realized the first man he shot was still alive. He aimed at the wounded man, this time killing him, but sparing his wife. Only one other employee remained. Frozen by fear, the 66-year-old was killed instantly by two quick shots. After the young woman heard the killer speed off, she ran for safety. Dozens of urgent 911 calls flooded the switchboard in Fairfax County, Virginia. All available units were ordered to respond. Emergency personnel from several towns raced to save those that clung to life. Fairfax County Detective Fred Fife is assigned as lead detective.
One of the first steps was to make sure that the scene itself was safe. We weren't sure what type of individuals we may have been dealing with, so we had to set up an armed security around the scene to prevent, a further attack.
Choppers searched for the fugitive from overhead. Several motorists reported seeing him flee into the surrounding woods after he drove off. The CIA immediately dispatched its tactical security forces to comb the 250-acre compound in and around headquarters. An exhaustive search turned up nothing. Authorities secured a 3-mile radius and closed busy Route 123 except to emergency personnel. At the crime scene, police found 2 dead and 3 critically wounded. 4 others escaped unharmed, 3 of them women. FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett arrived moments after the shooting.
The first thing you do when you walk into a crime scene is, what's the obvious? Well, the obvious is this appears to be directed towards the CIA. It might be directed towards the individuals that were shot. But it was clearly somebody wanted to make a public statement during the rush hour traffic.
The victims were rushed to area hospitals as investigators began to interview the survivors. Their first step was to alert the public and area law enforcement to the description of the fugitive and his vehicle. But most witnesses saw little, and their accounts varied.
The witnesses stated that the suspect was a male, mostly olive-complected type individual, armed with a rifle. And that was pretty much the composite description we were able to put together. Height varied. The vehicle ranged from being a brown station wagon to a blue truck. I think a lot of the people were in a panic situation and were shielding themselves from being victims.
One woman got a closer look than most. She described the shooter as a man with dark hair in his early 30s, wearing a tan jacket and dark pants. Though he had her in his sights, for some reason, he chose not to shoot.
We looked at the individuals that were killed, and we said, could there be a connection? Had they done something in the past that someone could have wanted to take revenge on them for whatever reason, whether it be personal or professional, because you got to look at this both ways.
The immediate crime scene covered an area of 50 square yards. Glass and shell casings littered the roadway. Forensic technicians needed to record every detail before the bodies of the two slain victims could be removed from their cars, according to Fairfax County crime scene detective Jeff Miller.
I have a duty to them, and my duty is I have to be their voice. They've been murdered. Here's this person who's silent forever, and somebody has to speak up for them. And so that's the way I look at it, is I'm their voice. And it's my job to find whatever it is that's going to help us find or identify the person who's responsible for this.
Crime scene investigators recovered 10 empty shell casings. They believe they were likely fired from an AK-47. Towards the back of the cars, where the gunman began firing, technicians also recovered one live round.
The forensic evidence always tells the truth. It's never clouded by someone's perception. It never lies to you. It's always telling the truth. And it's my job to find it. All I have to do is find it. And once I find it, and I'm able to examine it, it's going to tell me exactly what happened.
The live round on the ground told investigators that the weapon was a semi-automatic and had most likely jammed before the killer fired his first round. Noting the location of the casings in relation to the shattered glass enabled the team to determine the trajectories and order of the gunman's bullets. Investigators also gathered glass samples from each of the vehicle's broken windows. They hoped the combination of several types of glass found in the same location would prove significant.
You had a number of different cars. Each of the cars was a different manufacturer. It had a German car, had an American car, had a Swedish car. The glass that's put in these cars is all different. If some of this glass had spattered back on the shooter, even though it was microscopic, someone who had these three different kinds of glass on their clothing, that might be probative of the investigation.
While investigators continued to gather evidence at the crime scene, agents and detectives visited nearby hospitals to speak to the remaining survivors. The young woman who had lost her husband in the assault hadn't seen much since she hid below the dashboard most of the time. She said that the man could have shot her at any moment, but like the previous female survivor, he turned away instead of firing. She also told investigators that she and her husband normally used a different entrance to drive into the CIA compound. FBI agent Brad Garrett wondered who else might have known this.
We immediately started looking at who within the CIA, in other words, disgruntled employees, present employees that may have had a relationship with these people that could have retaliated for whatever reason. There's a lot of bizarre people that have applied to work for the CIA, and they've rejected a lot of people.
At the Fairfax County Command Center, the female witness who had gotten the best look at the gunman worked with a police sketch artist.
Swear.
Based on her description, investigators believe the suspect was of Hispanic or Middle Eastern background. She had not gotten as good a look at his vehicle, but recalled that it was a station wagon. Investigators released the drawings to the public, hoping to elicit leads.
One of the first things we had to do was to get out through the media that afternoon a phone number or a system where the potential witnesses that had been in that area that morning could contact us. And we needed to isolate a phone number for that purpose and get it out to the media as quickly as possible.
As calls poured in, agents and detectives were still grappling to find a clear motive for the shooting. If they could deduce a reason for the shooter's actions, it would limit the potential suspect pool. Agents searched the victims' backgrounds for possibilities as to why they may have been targeted.
He then walked up to this car and fired one more shot into car H.
Once we started looking at the backgrounds of the individuals that were shot, and we looked at the circumstances as to why they were at that intersection, it didn't appear, at least to me, that there probably was a link between them being shot, those particular individuals being shot, and the person or persons that shot them.
Just 8 hours after the shooting, Fairfax County Detective Jeff Miller examined the cartridges recovered from the pavement at the crime scene. He confirmed the shells were from an AK-47 assault rifle, a weapon used primarily by Russian and Chinese armies. Upon closer inspection, Detective Miller discovered a latent fingerprint on the shell.
The difficult part about this whole situation was cartridge casing is a cylindrical shape. The fingerprint went about 300 degrees almost all the way around this cartridge case. So what I had to do was photograph it in different steps. I'd photograph it, then I would turn it about 1/16 of an inch, adjust the light so that it was exactly the same, and photograph it again. And then I would continue to do that over and over so that I had photographed the entire circumference of the cartridge casing.
The hour-long process yielded one complete fingerprint. It was investigators' first solid lead. Detectives fed the print into a system that was connected to 185 other databases throughout North America.
We could take that one latent fingerprint and send it to any automated fingerprint system in North America and ask them to search their database to see if that fingerprint was on file or was recorded within any of their automated systems.
Unfortunately, the extensive search provided no match.
Print it up?
Yeah.
Either the suspect had no record, or he had not committed any crimes within North America. The next morning, police looked for witnesses among area commuters on Route 123 who may have seen something unusual the morning of the attack. They handed out flyers with a sketch of the suspect to 3,000 motorists. Intense media attention generated sightings from across the country. None immediately panned out, but the reports were maintained in the command center's growing database. Through the night, patrols on the roads around Northern Virginia and the Washington, D.C. area remained on high alert. That evening, a car fitting the description of the suspects was pulled over by a Virginia state trooper. The trooper called for backup, then approached the vehicle. He had no idea if he had the shooter or if the man was carrying an AK-47.
Sir, remain.
On January 26, 1993, 36 hours after a lone gunman opened fire with an AK-47 in front of CIA headquarters, killing 2 and wounding 3 others. Virginia state troopers stopped a vehicle that fit the description of the suspect's car.
Put your hands up, keep your hands up.
The killer had been described vaguely as having an olive complexion, medium build, and dark hair.
Okay, buddy, we've been looking for you.
Though the man troopers stopped also fit that description. A fingerprint check confirmed he was not the fugitive.
Okay, then we have,
By now, dozens of personnel from the CIA, ATF, and the FBI had joined Fairfax County Detective Fred Fife's team in pursuit of the murderer.
As additional manpower was needed for different areas, they were brought in and supplemented us. The FBI was very generous. They supplied us not only with the hard technology, the computers and so forth, but their clerical staff to maintain the information management system that we had designed, that we felt we could process the leads as they were coming in.
FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett was concerned that despite recovering a fingerprint from a shell casing at the crime scene, investigators were still unable to identify the perpetrator or his motive. All they knew for sure was that the gunman used an AK-47.
So I made this decision. I said, let's go back and look at all the AK-47s purchased in the last year. And the reason we did that was that typically people who commit these kind of acts buy their weapons a short time or acquire their weapons a short time before they commit the act.
Over the next several days, ATF agents visited gun shops in the Virginia and Maryland area outside of Washington, D.C., since the purchase or possession of firearms is forbidden within city limits. They discovered that 1,000 AK-47s were purchased in Northern Virginia over the past year. Another 600 had been purchased in Maryland. Agents gathered records of every purchase and entered the gun owners' names into the command center's large computer database. At firing ranges within 100 miles of CIA headquarters, agents also questioned gun owners directly.
We're investigating the shootings near the CIA headquarters.
They asked if they remembered anyone in the past year who matched the suspect's description and had practiced with an AK-47. They remembered no one. By February 1st, a week after the shooting, investigators hoped their growing database of witness descriptions and gun purchases could provide a common link among the thousands of names and police reports entered so far. Agents and detectives set parameters for the database to cross-reference the suspect's physical characteristics with those who made a recent purchase of an AK-47 and who had a local address. The computer returned one name, 28-year-old Mir Emal Kanzi. He had purchased an AK-47 3 days before the shooting. He was a Pakistani immigrant who lived in Herndon, Virginia, and was reported missing 3 days after the shooting by his roommate. Investigators immediately dispatched a team of agents to track down Mir Emal Kanzi. Kanzi was not at home, but the roommate who reported him missing worked at nearby Dulles International Airport. Kanzi's roommate, also a Pakistani immigrant, was employed by a security company to operate a magnetometer that checked passengers for weapons.
Agent Johnson, any question him? Come with me? Yes, sir.
He told the FBI that he hadn't seen Kanzi for several days.
Set up an interview sometime soon. No, sir.
He said he was unable to talk at length since he was on duty, but would meet agents later at his apartment in Herndon, Virginia to answer all their questions.
If anything comes up, just give me a call. Okay, sir.
The roommate added that he was scheduled to fly back to Pakistan later in the week, but would cooperate with authorities until then. When investigators arrived to question the roommate again, he wasn't there. They soon discovered that the roommate had changed his travel plans.
A lot of the plans and commitments that he had told the FBI agent and the detective on Sunday had started to change. He gave a notice at his apartment that he was going to be leaving on Tuesday instead of Thursday. He switched a flight to Pakistan back to Tuesday. That was the first opportunity he would have to fly out of the country. We started finding all this information. He shut his utilities off at his apartment. In other words, he was preparing to leave the United States in a big hurry.
With less than 24 hours until the roommate's flight departed, agents maintained constant surveillance, hoping to catch the roommate or Kanzi at home.
What's up?
Their perseverance paid off. They found the roommate alone at home.
So, what happened yesterday?
There were few items in the apartment.
Mind if I look in the bedroom? No, no problem.
It appeared that both Kanzi and the roommate were not planning to return. The man didn't know where Kanzi was now, but consented to allow the investigators to search what was left in the barren apartment. In a suitcase stored in the bedroom, agents discovered a Beretta and Makarov automatic pistols, ammunition for an AK-47, and a bulletproof vest.
About 10 years. About 10 years. I don't know anything about that. No, sir.
The roommate denied any knowledge of the weapons and claimed that the suitcase belonged to Kanzi.
I didn't know anything about what he carries or what I would watch.
Investigators continued to search the apartment. Under a couch wrapped in plastic, they found another gun.
I don't talk to him. I don't even have a conversation. He just pays the rent.
It was an AK-47, the same type of weapon used to kill 2 and wound 3 in front of CIA headquarters. The roommate said he didn't know the weapon was there and added that he had only met Kanzi a few months earlier when Kanzi had first moved in.
The roommate told us that Mr. Kanzi initially came to him through another Pakistani because Mr. Kanzi was looking for a place to live. The roommate said, fine, you can live with me, and they set an amount of money for Mr. Kanzi to live with him.
It's not mine.
They hoped the FBI lab could confirm forensically that they had found the murder weapon. But for now, their prime suspect, Mir Amal Kanzi, was still unaccounted for. By February 8, 1993, 2 weeks had passed since a lone gunman opened fire with an AK-47 in front of CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia, killing 2 CIA employees and wounding 3 others. The FBI, ATF, and Fairfax County Police believed 28-year-old Mir Amal Kanzi, a Pakistani immigrant, was their prime suspect. At Kanzi's apartment in Herndon, Virginia, investigators continued their search where they had found an AK-47, the same type of weapon used in the CIA shootings. Kanzi was missing, and his Pakistani roommate, who was scheduled to return to Pakistan the following day, had no idea where Kanzi was now, according to FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett.
The roommate told us that he really didn't spend much time with Mr. Kanzi. The roommate worked 2 jobs, Mr. Kanzi worked a job. They would occasionally go to the mosque together to pray, but that their interactions with each other were very limited. They were in the apartment many times at different times of the day when the other one was gone.
Hoping to assail investigators' suspicions of him, the roommate signed his consent to assist with the investigation. In a closet, investigators found a tan field jacket similar to the one witnesses had described worn by the shooter.
In fact, I've seen him.
The roommate told him the coat belonged to Kanzi. Outside the apartment, the roommate pointed out Kanzi's vehicle parked at the curb, a small pickup truck. Officers confirmed it was registered to the suspect.
Yeah, we've got a
Inside, they spotted a map that was open to the CIA headquarters area in Langley, Virginia.
Okay, look at that.
Close by, they also saw a clipping about the CIA director. Agents would need to secure a warrant before they could conduct a more thorough search. If this was the vehicle used by the killer, witnesses' descriptions of the car at the shooting had been wrong. Though the roommate had cooperated with investigators, Fairfax County Detective Fred Fife wasn't going to take any chances.
We knew Mr. Kanzi's roommate was planning on leaving the United States because he had purchased airline tickets for a flight out of the United States, which was one way. He was not planning on returning. He was deemed a material witness to the investigation and subsequently taken into custody and held based on his abilities to flee the United States.
At police headquarters, investigators continued to question Kanzi's roommate.
He might do something violent. It was the night that
He told them Kanzi had worked as a messenger for a local courier service since August of 1992. 6 months earlier, in February 1992, Kanzi had received political asylum and a work permit from the Immigration and Naturalization Service.
We were fortunate in this case that we had Mr. Kanzi's prints because he had no criminal record in the United States, but the Immigration Service here in the U.S. had fingerprinted him at one point because he had asked for asylum here in the United States. So they had a fingerprint card that we were able to get from them.
Lab technicians were called in to process the forensic evidence through the night as the roommate told investigators more about Kanzi.
Directed against the American.
He said Kanzi was usually quiet. But when he watched television news reports, he became enraged at how Muslims were being treated during conflicts in Bosnia, Iraq, and Israel. That's when Kanzi vowed to take action.
The roommate eventually admitted that Mr. Kanzi had told him that he was going to go do something big. And we asked him to define big, and he said, well, I'm not sure, but maybe a shooting of some sort. And he mentioned going and doing something big at the CIA, the White House, or the Israeli embassy.
Agents believe the roommate was not connected with the shootings. But he was not permitted to leave the country until the investigation was complete. Lab examiners compared the fingerprint lifted from the shell casing found at the shooting to Kanzi's fingerprint on file at the INS. They matched. Investigators also confirmed that the serial number of the weapon recovered in the apartment matched the serial number of the Chinese-made AK-47 purchased by Kanzi 3 days before the CIA killings. Kanzi had presented 2 forms of ID for a Virginia State Police background check, and the purchase had been approved within minutes. FBI lab examiners then compared bullets and shell casings test-fired through Kanzi's AK-47 with the bullets and shell casings collected from the crime scene by Fairfax detective Jeff Miller.
The firearms examiner was able to say that the bullets at the crime scene were fired from the gun that was collected from Kanzi's apartment. He was also able to examine the cartridge casings that he test-fired at the laboratory from the AK-47 and compare them to the cartridge casings that I collected at the crime scene. And he was able to say that the cartridge casings at the crime scene were in fact fired from the same weapon.
Technicians next examined the field jacket seized from Kanzi's apartment closet. If this was the same coat witnesses had seen the shooter wearing when he fired point blank into their vehicles, tiny shards of glass would be embedded in its material.
You had glass from a German car, glass from a Swedish car, glass from an American car, and if he had all 3 of those types of glass in his clothing or on his shoes, then that would be pretty obvious that he was, if not there, at least he was near the scene when it happened, because he's got all this glass on him. They were able to find glass particles in his clothing that matched the type of glass that came from all of the vehicles at the scene.
Investigators had enough evidence to charge Mir Emal Kanzi with capital murder and malicious wounding. The FBI also filed charges of flight to avoid prosecution and offered a $100,000 reward for information leading to Kanzi's capture. Agents fanned out to interview members of the Washington area Pakistani community. They were looking for Kanzi's friends, acquaintances, or anyone who had come into contact with him.
We learned that Mr. Kanzi had gone to a market in Herndon, Virginia, and the individual who ran the market had a connection at a travel agency. And we learned through this individual that Mr. Kanzi had come to him on the afternoon of the 25th, the day of the shooting, and bought a one-way ticket to Pakistan.
The manager said that Kanzi had only one suitcase and needed a ride to the airport, so the manager drove Kanzi there himself. Agents confirmed that Kanzi boarded a flight to Quetta, Pakistan, a city less than 80 miles from the Afghanistan border. 2 weeks after the shooting spree at the CIA headquarters, a worldwide manhunt for the killer got underway. The investigation would begin 8,000 miles away from the crime scene in the Muslim nation of Pakistan. In February 1993, 32-year-old Pakistani Mir Emal Kanzi was wanted by the FBI for killing 2 and wounding 3 CIA employees on the highway outside CIA headquarters in Langley, Virginia. 2 weeks after the shooting, agents learned that on January 25th, Kanzi had boarded a one-way flight to Quetta, Pakistan, a city less than 80 miles from the Afghanistan border. By now, he could be anywhere. Finding the fugitive halfway around the world presented overwhelming problems for FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett.
One of the difficulties in investigating any case overseas is that, first of all, you have no jurisdiction to begin with. You're just another citizen, a U.S. citizen traveling to a foreign country. So the key in catching any fugitive, obviously, is developing intelligence information. And you do that typically through informants.
The FBI turned to DEA Supervisory Special Agent Gregory Lee for help. Since Pakistan had been a major source country of heroin and hashish, the DEA already had established many reliable contacts and informants over the previous 10 years. At the time of the investigation, Agent Lee was the resident agent in charge of the DEA's office in Karachi, Pakistan.
Well, the working environment there is a complete contrast to what an FBI agent would be used to working domestically in the United States. And it's like you literally fell out of a tree and then showed up at a place that is foreign to him in every way, to include the language, the infrastructure, how to get around, who to see. We could provide him with protection, with weapons, with anything he needed to help conduct his investigation.
In a country of 135 million people that was politically volatile and had rampant corruption among officials, the FBI would need all the help it could get. Agent Garrett also realized that Kanzi would have many sympathetic supporters who could hide him in Pakistan or even in neighboring Afghanistan.
He would be respected in Afghanistan. In fact, he was respected in Pakistan. The CIA, in particular, and the U.S. government in general, is not well liked in either one of those countries. And as a result, people didn't want to give you information about him, because they thought what he did was, in some people's words, heroic.
In March of 1993, the U.S. State Department declared Kanzi's alleged attack on CIA employees an act of terrorism and raised the reward for information leading to his capture to $2 million. With the groundwork established, Agent Garrett boarded a 21-hour flight to Karachi, Pakistan. When he landed, DEA agents had already arranged for him to meet his first contact. Agents distributed pamphlets and matchbooks with Kanzi's photo, publicizing the $2 million reward in English, Arabic, and Punjabi. The reward generated leads from as far away as Thailand and London. But informants in Pakistan claimed Kanzi was hiding among the small border towns and tribes in Afghanistan.
Kanzi's family originally was from Afghanistan. Their family roots go back to Afghanistan. And keep in mind that the city that Kanzi is from, Quetta, Pakistan, is only about 80 miles from Afghanistan. And so the natural link between Kanzi, Quetta, family heritage, and Afghanistan made sense.
Agents traveled to Kanzi's large family home in Quetta and interviewed his brothers, who were wealthy landowners. They confirmed that he had visited them back in January, a few days after the shooting in Virginia. Kanzi arrived unannounced, carrying only one small bag. That was unusual, considering the length of the trip from the U.S. The brothers also thought it was odd that Kanzi was wearing no coat, since winter in Pakistan was then at its coldest. Kanzi only stayed for a few days, then left as quickly as he'd arrived. He didn't tell them where he was going, and they hadn't heard from him since.
Not very long, just enough to...
A few weeks later, the brothers became aware that their brother Amal was a wanted terrorist from reports on CNN.
Give you our card.
Agents believed it was likely that Kanzi had disappeared over the nearby border into Afghanistan.
We knew that it would be safer for him in Afghanistan because, by and large, Afghanistan, particularly back then, is a country that's just basically a bunch of tribes that control different parts of Afghanistan. At that particular time, really had no central government that had control of Afghanistan. So it's like, who would you even go to ask permission to come into Afghanistan?
The investigation had hit a dead end. Agents returned from Pakistan without the fugitive. Kanzi's trail went cold for the next 3 years, so the State Department raised the reward for information leading to his capture to $3.5 million. While Agent Garrett waited in Washington for the reward money to flush out a viable informant, he spent time with FBI fingerprint experts. Since so much time had passed, he needed to learn how to recognize Kanzi through his fingerprints in order to be certain they had the right man if he was arrested in a remote location. The agent studied the unique ridges and grooves of each one of Kanzi's 10 fingerprints that he'd given the INS years earlier.
I see that.
He was also taught how to fingerprint a resisting suspect under field conditions.
This is a case that obviously took a large chunk of my life to work on, you know, and I guess one of my fears might be that we never would catch him, you know, and which is entirely possible.
In April 1997, after 4 years of pursuit, an FBI agent at the U.S. consulate in Karachi, Pakistan, received a call from one of their more reliable sources. The man claimed he had information on Kanzi's whereabouts, but the informant didn't want to say more over the phone.
All right.
He told the agent to wait in a public place and that a second man would contact him on his cell phone in an hour. The crowded streets of Karachi would provide ample cover. If the wrong people saw the informant talking to an American agent, he would certainly be killed. As instructed, the agent waited on the street for the call. The agent hoped his contact would have viable information that would finally lead the FBI to Kanzi. The informant claimed he not only knew where Kanzi was, but that he could put the fugitive in a specific hotel at a certain time to enable his arrest. The informant represented a group of Kanzi's protectors who decided the reward money was too great to pass up. The highest levels of the U.S. government were involved. The White House approved a secret arrest plan. The Secretary of State then secured permission from the Pakistani leader for U.S. agents to carry out the operation.
Pakistan is very sensitive to their image. They're very proud people. They don't like the idea of a Pakistani being identified as an international terrorist, somebody who would travel halfway around the world to Washington for the purpose of killing CIA employees. To them, he's an embarrassment.
Gentlemen, welcome.
Agents arrived in Pakistan with a special ops team from the FBI training facility in Quantico, Virginia.
Just exactly what our intelligence.
They would need to extract Kanzi from a hotel room in a remote desert town in north-central Pakistan, where their informant promised he'd be.
Getting his fingerprint is going to be key.
Gentlemen, let me direct
Each member would be assigned a task based on a surveillance report of the hotel's layout. Agents secured a room across from the hotel where the informant claimed Kanzi would be staying. They had no way to independently confirm if Kanzi was there. All they had was the informant's word. The informant told investigators that Kanzi's room was on an upper floor.
All right, let's do that. That's great.
Okay.
Based on the informant's description of the interior layout, agents would have to first secure the lobby and then the stairwell before they could enter Kanzi's room. The informant added that the hotel did not lock its front door and had no security guard.
Show us where the person.
We took that information, we developed an arrest plan, how we were going to enter the room, who was going to do hall security, what we were going to do once we were in the room. Because it's extremely important when you do arrest scenarios that everyone know exactly where they're going and what they're supposed to do.
Each had their assignments. Once they secured the lobby and stairwell, the front agent would coax the fugitive out of his room by calling for morning prayer. They put on body armor and checked their weapons. To hide their paraphernalia, they wore shalwar kamises, traditional Pakistani clothing, over their Western garb. On June 15, 1997, the operation to arrest Mir Emal Kanzi went into action. The team arrived at 4 a.m., figuring there'd be fewer people on the street at that early hour. But when they tried to enter the hotel, they found the front door was locked.
We can't get in. So here's 4 Americans dressed up in Pakistani garb standing out, at 4:05 in the morning outside this hotel. Clearly the anxiety was, off the charts because of where you were. It's almost like you're in a dream a little bit. It's like this is surreal.
To make matters worse, the street was filled with people who likely noticed that the Americans were clearly out of place.
We didn't realize that this particular location was extremely hot in the summer. So people started to work at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. So the street was full of people. So it's another thing that we didn't calculate for.
The informant had been wrong about the locked door. After 4.5 years of pursuing Kanzi, the FBI had hit another obstacle. On June 15, 1997, an FBI arrest team disguised in Pakistani garb attempted to gain entry to a locked hotel in north-central Pakistan where they believed suspected terrorist Mir Emal Kanzi was hiding. But to FBI Special Agent Brad Garrett, it appeared that their informant had misled the team.
When we went up to the hotel, and the initial intelligence was that the door would be unlocked and there'd be no security guard, and we get there and the door is locked, and then within a few minutes we realized that there is a security guard there.
Agents summoned the guard and pushed their way into the hotel. The team secured the lobby and moved quickly up the stairs. They hoped the informant had been correct about Kanzi's room number, if the fugitive was in fact there at all. When everyone was in place, The front agent knocked on the door and called for morning prayer to coax out whoever was on the other side of the door. If Kanzi was inside, he may be armed. Agents prepared for the worst. The door cracked open, and the agents pushed forward. The man put up a struggle and began to scream. He had to be gagged so others in the hotel would not be awakened.
I tell him, after he calms down a little bit, that if I take the gag off, will you promise not to yell anymore? And he said yes. So we take the gag off. He doesn't yell anymore. I ask him his name. He says an obscenity to me in English. He didn't look like his picture. He gained weight. And I said, you know, I'm not sure if this is the right guy.
The agent hoped the man's fingerprint would match prints Kanzi had provided for the INS 6 years earlier.
Okay, guys.
He inked the suspect's thumb and compared it to Kanzi's known thumbprint.
What are you?
The prints matched. After more than 4 years and 8,000 miles, the FBI finally had suspected terrorist Mir Emal Kanzi in custody. But their mission was by no means complete. Not only did they have to get Kanzi and themselves out of the hotel safely, but also out of Pakistan altogether. DEA Supervisory Special Agent Gregory Lee assisted the FBI with logistical support in Pakistan.
You've got a guy in custody now, and you're in a foreign land, you're about 8,000 miles from home, you're out in what's essentially the high desert that would be Death Valley here, and you're trying to get this guy from Pakistan back to the United States.
Americans holding a Pakistani citizen captive in his own country is dangerous. Agents drove the international fugitive to a waiting helicopter and flew him to Islamabad, where permission for extradition was granted the next day. FBI headquarters in Washington was informed with a code phrase: the package has been delivered. The arrest team flew Kanzi out of Pakistan on an Air Force plane. To avoid landing in a foreign country, the plane was refueled in mid-air, so Kanzi could not ask for asylum before facing justice in the United States. During the 21-hour non-stop flight, Kanzi confided that he'd been in Afghanistan for almost the entire 4 years while he was on the run. He also claimed responsibility for the shooting in front of CIA headquarters. As a political statement against the CIA of the United States, he had decided to kill workers before they pulled into the heavily guarded entrance. He explained that he didn't shoot any women because Islam forbids it. He said that after the shooting, he was surprised that he was still alive. So he drove to a nearby park, went to lunch, then bought a plane ticket to Pakistan.
I said, well, why did you quit shooting? Because you had told us earlier that you had all this ammunition on you and that we had found all this ammunition in your apartment. And he said that he ran out of people to shoot.
Affirming that his statement had been given freely and willingly, Kanzi signed his confession. After arriving in the U.S., a chopper transported the prisoner to a secure location. Under heavy security, agents delivered Kanzi to the Fairfax County Police to face the murder and assault charges. Fairfax County Detective Jeff Miller remembers that day.
Having him captured and brought back to the United States showed to the whole rest of the world that the United States, the FBI, the Central Intelligence Agency, is not going to just let this sort of thing lie and not do something about it. No matter how long it takes, no matter where these kinds of people may hide, the United States is going to do their very best to try and track these people down and bring them back to justice.
Kanzi was found guilty of murder, malicious shooting, and using a firearm in the commission of a felony. He was sentenced to death and is scheduled for execution in 2002. In the wake of the shootings, memorials to the slain victims were established on Highway 123, where they fell to the gunman's bullets. The CIA tightened its security at the Langley compound and at all of its offices around the world. The successful investigation would prove to be another in the long line of battles against terrorism. In Virginia, a bank robbery explodes in violence. Spraying bullets from automatic weapons at anyone in their way, the robbers disappear. With no reliable witnesses, the police and the FBI have to decipher fragmented evidence to identify the shooters and then bring them to justice.
Despite what you see in the movies, most bank robbers come in quietly, pass a note, and slip away. They want cash, not bloodshed. But in Richmond, Virginia, a pair of gunmen entered a bank with their guns blazing. I'm Jim Kallstrom, former head of the FBI's New York office. The raw violence of the crime shocked even the most seasoned investigators, who vowed to catch them before they struck again.
Throughout the 1990s, Richmond, Virginia averaged about 10 bank robberies a year. Prior to 1997, not one of them was fatal. On the morning of January 30th, 1997, the employees of a small bank on the east end of the city began the day's business. "23-year-old Christine Edwards, one of the bank's tellers, arrived for work. Her colleague, 21-year-old Tracy Freeman, was already there. Allison Davis, a customer service representative, and Richard Hartman, the bank's security guard, also began their day. Stephen Reed, a regular customer, arrived shortly thereafter. He entered the bank as the tellers finished setting up and was greeted by Hartman.
Good morning, how may I help you, sir?
No one saw the two men slipping in the bank's rear door.
First National Bank, how may I help you? Oh, yes. Uh-huh.
When the men struck, they did so swiftly and without mercy. "80 yards away, Richmond police officers Michael Webb and Dave Martin were at a convenience store getting coffee for their morning shift.
Hey! Something's happening at the bank.
Where?
I heard gunshots in the bank.
The bank, about a block
the bank
down?
right up the street.
Excuse me, back up.
As the officers responded, Richmond Dispatch ordered backup units to the scene.
16 respond. 929, 116.
At the rear of the bank, the officers spotted a security guard lying in the parking lot.
The bank, man down, look like he's been shot. We're going to the front now.
Officer Martin guarded the front as Webb went to check on the guard. He was still alive. Barely. Webb called for an ambulance.
EMP now.
Then, two armed men emerged from the bank.
Stop! 119, 10-5 to 119W. Shot. Going all right.
Shots are being fired, Judge.
Webb emptied his clip. The officer knew he was pinned down and outgunned.
They stopped shooting. I stopped shooting. And I just knew these two guys were going to come each side of the vehicle after me. I changed magazines and sat there and waited for a couple of seconds.
But the gunman never came for him. Officer Martin left his position to back up Webb, but the assailant surprised him. With only a service weapon, Martin was outgunned, which allowed the robbers to get away from him. All the officer could do was report their position as they escaped across the cemetery.
Got a black male running with black jacket toward Divertown Road. 2 men.
The Richmond officer saw a cloud of red dye, the sign that the gunman had stolen a bundle of money containing a timed dye pack. The men leapt over the next wall, and the officer lost sight of them. The dispatcher forwarded the information to the Henrico County Police Department. Officer Martin searched the neighborhood, knowing 2 men with automatic weapons could be around any corner, but found no sign of the suspects.
.233 radio.
An Henrico patrolman arrived on the scene. EMTs arrived. They tended to the wounded guard outside. Richmond police entered the building.
Police, everybody down! Stay where you are!
Looking for any other gunman that might still be inside, and to check the condition of the other employees.
One teller down over here on the left.
They found 2 tellers, both shot.
It's okay. Come on out, man. Come on, everything's fine.
Allison Davis had taken cover.
Come on, come with me. Is she okay? Everything's okay.
She was not injured, but paralyzed with fear and taken to the hospital for evaluation. After clearing the bank, the officers felt it was safe to let the EMTs care for the wounded. For teller Christine Edwards, it was too late.
It's gone. Forensics responding. A SWAT and forensics responding. Supervisors for crime scene control.
Okay. Tell me where it hurts.
Tracy Freeman, in severe shock and bleeding heavily, was stabilized and rushed to the hospital.
All right.
Along with Richard Hartman, the security guard. At the Richmond Police Homicide Division, Detective Tom Leonard was disturbed by the robbers' brutality.
This was our most violent bank robbery that we can remember in our history. So our fear was they were in the neighborhood and we needed to get them off the streets.
Leonard headed to the bank. Officers collected items dropped by the robbers when they fled, including a Lorson 380 semi-automatic handgun and the clip to a Tech 9, another semi-automatic weapon. A K-9 officer with a tracking dog began searching for the suspects. The dog followed a scent through the cemetery. On Art Avenue, the dog lost the trail. Henrico and Richmond police canvassed the neighborhood, asking the residents if they had seen any strange men fleeing the area.
Rita?
but no one saw anything suspicious. Detective Leonard arrived at the crime scene with an evidence technician.
We immediately shut down that bank, and the only people that were inside the bank was myself and forensic people. So as we went through the bank looking for forensic evidence that we could pick up and look at, we found a lot of spent shell casings which were fired. We had some that were unfired.
Those shells were 9mm, likely used in the Tech 9. Behind the teller's counter, investigators found a backpack, apparently left by the robbers. Inside was a piece of green tablecloth, a bottle of charcoal lighter fluid, a box of matches, and a note reading, "Please wait 5 minutes."
We couldn't figure out what that was all about.
On the surface of the teller's counter, investigators spotted several boot prints. They preserved each print with tape, which they would later compare with footwear collected from potential suspects. Because the bank was federally insured, police called in FBI Special Agent Wayne Waddell from the Richmond field office.
Let's go ahead and see what we can get on this, Tom.
At the bank, he and Detective Leonard checked a videotape that had recorded several surveillance cameras simultaneously. But there was a problem.
Oh man, Tom, look at that. We got a problem. Something caused the film, in our opinion, to not be working correctly. It went one camera to another camera to another camera, and you were getting different angles from the front door, the rear door, and from different teller positions.
They would need to make still photos from the individual frames to get any useful details. Special Agent Eduardo Alford joined the investigation. He knew the FBI would not stop until the gunmen were captured.
I'm sure if you talk to every person that was involved in this investigation, they would tell you the same thing. They wanted to stay on this case around the clock, which essentially is what happened.
Evidence collection at the bank lasted for hours.
Later on in the evening, at around 5:30 or 6, we received word that Henrico County had received a report of a break-in. I went over to the break-in site.
It was on Art Avenue, across from the cemetery, not far from where the K-9 unit had lost the trail of the suspects.
We didn't know if it had anything to do with the bank robbery or not. A young woman that lived there with her father found the front door had been knocked open and went in the house and discovered a lot of items that appeared knocked around or perhaps taken.
When Special Agent Waddell went inside, a Henrico officer pointed out a hole in the ceiling. It appeared someone had stepped through from above. They feared someone might be hiding in the attic. No one was there. They searched for evidence. Investigators found a pair of boots. They also found a backpack and a coat. Inside was another note reading, "Please wait 5 minutes." They also found another green tablecloth. Red dye, like that used in bank dye packs, covered many of the items.
So we absolutely felt that there was a connection between the house break-in and the bank robbery.
But they didn't know how the two crimes were related.
We had no idea why the bank robbers would come to that house. Was it an opportune moment? Did they know someone there? Was there something that drew them there? Was it happenstance? We had no idea. We interviewed the owner and his daughter and the daughter's boyfriend. And you interview these people because what are these bank robbers, what are these suspects doing in your house? And we're trying to find, is there a link or is there not a link? Diamond brown?
The residents were equally confused. They reported that whoever broke into the house stole some men's clothing, suits and jackets. During questioning, the boyfriend acted nervous and claimed he had no information to add.
About what time did you get here?
At the hospital, a Richmond detective sought out the wounded victims who could provide eyewitness accounts.
Yes, ma'am.
But he was unable to see anyone. The two wounded survivors were still in surgery and could not be interviewed. Allison Davis, the customer representative who had escaped injury under her desk, was so distraught she had to be heavily sedated. Stephen Reed, the customer inside the bank, had been grazed by a bullet and had come to the emergency room on his own. But he was also of no help. He had Alzheimer's disease and could not remember any useful information.
By the end of that first day, we still had nothing more than what we had to begin with. So we knew there was going to be a ways to go. It was going to be a tough case.
In Richmond, Virginia, two armed bank robbers escaped with $10,000 cash, leaving two employees wounded, and 23-year-old teller Christine Edwards dead. The community was stunned, as was Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Altamari.
This girl was an angel. And these guys, they just walked into the bank without a word spoken and shot her dead. It's sick.
Determined to find her killers, Richmond homicide detective Tom Leonard and FBI Special Agent Wayne Waddell had to pursue the case without the benefit of eyewitness accounts.
The problem with the employees and the customer that were in the bank is they were all traumatized. We actually could not talk to any of them for several days.
The detective tried to interview Allison Davis, the customer representative who had taken cover under her desk and escaped injury. But she was too traumatized by the ordeal.
Yes, I'm Detective.
Hospital staff had to sedate her, and she was unable to speak.
Call means 30 seconds.
There were no witnesses available to tell investigators what actually happened inside the bank. All they had to understand those events was a flawed videotape of the surveillance cameras, according to Detective Tom Leonard.
That really caused us a problem trying to piece things together because we were missing little bits and pieces of the video, so you didn't get to see the whole robbery occur like you normally would.
Working with still photos captured from the surveillance video and records of the physical evidence recovered from the bank, the investigators pieced the crime together moment by moment. It was a complex series of events, all taking place in a matter of seconds.
You could see where the bank had obviously opened, but the only people who were inside were the security guard, the bank representatives, and one customer. The customer was standing there at the walkway area where you go through your little lines, talking to the security guard.
The lead gunman headed straight for the teller's counter.
The first guy bypassed the security guard without even looking at him, without even noticing him. In our minds, we realized the front guy was not worried about the security guard. He knew that the second guy was going to take him out.
In the photos, investigators saw the second robber pointing the Tech-9 at the guard. The first robber reached the counter and shot both tellers, killing one.
Rack that weapon, and he walks all the way down here.
Ballistics testing showed both were shot with the Lorsen 380 recovered outside the bank.
Going over the counter.
A bullet hole behind the customer representative's desk showed the gunman turned and fired at her, but the shot missed. Investigators noted the unfired 9mm rounds found on the floor. This suggested the Tech 9 had likely jammed and the gunman ejected rounds trying to clear it.
I think when she...
The photos revealed there was a brief standoff while the second robber tried to clear his Tech 9. The first attempted to shoot the guard with a Lorsen, but that gun malfunctioned too. The Lorsen 380, recovered outside the bank, was found with a jammed cartridge. When the guns jammed, the customer, Stephen Reed, fled, followed by Richard Hartman, the guard. Unable to clear the Lorsen, the lead gunman pulled an AR-15 assault rifle and followed them. Spent shell casings and bullet strikes found outside supported witness statements as to what had happened next in the bank's drive-thru. One witness saw a gunman chasing the fleeing customer. He grazed his arm. The guard tried his best to stop the killer, but was struck by multiple rounds. The gunman returned inside. Hartman was still alive. The witness watched as he entered the rear of the bank.
He pulls open that back door, the wooden door, right?
Investigators realized Hartman had risked his life trying to draw the robbers out. The robbers loaded a backpack with money, including one bundle that contained a dye pack. The guard approached, fired, but missed. Another witness saw the guard flee the rear of the bank. The lead gunman pursued him into the parking lot and fired. The final shot to the temple permanently blinded Richard Hartman. Moments later, officers Webb and Martin found him there. Agent Waddell and Detective Leonard now had a clear account of the crime. Since the robbers came into the bank shooting, investigators believed their intent was to murder everyone, to eliminate all witnesses at the bank. The contents of the robbers' backpack revealed a plan to minimize witnesses on the outside.
The tablecloths and the note were, I think, to be put over the doors to ward off anyone coming up to the bank. Give us 5 minutes, we're still cleaning. Give us 5 minutes, we're not ready to open up yet. Something like that.
With the bank to themselves, the robbers could take their time. The piece of evidence that disturbed investigators the most was the lighter fluid. They believed the robbers were planning to use it to set the bank on fire as they left. Investigators knew they were dealing with especially violent criminals who acted with no remorse.
We needed to get them off the streets. Our fear was these people were going to get out into the community and commit some more murders because they'd already been bold enough to come into the bank and start shooting people. And we'd have to gunfight with these people to try to catch them later.
And the criminals were well armed. They still had an AR-15, the civilian version of the military's assault rifle, and a Tech 9, a 9mm semi-automatic pistol. The one weapon recovered, the murder weapon, was a Lorsen 380 semi-automatic. A records check revealed it had been stolen weeks earlier. Investigators released details of the guns to the press and asked for the public's help in tracking down the weapons. It worked, according to Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Altamari.
We got lucky. We got very lucky. There was a person who was out there that overheard a woman that she worked with say that she thought that her husband sold those weapons. The FBI and the Richmond PD followed up on that lead and in fact did locate a gentleman who was a legitimate and licensed gun dealer.
At first, the dealer was reluctant to talk to authorities. He didn't want to incriminate himself by admitting that he might have sold weapons used in a murder. After agents assured him he could not be held liable since the guns were sold legally, he admitted he had sold a Tech-9 and an AR-15 a few days before the robbery.
Yeah, I got it all right here.
He located the ATF forms filled out by the purchaser. Investigators now had a name to move on.
The gun dealer told us that he had sold the weapons to Jermaine Sims. And we got hold of all of the units, all the guys working the case. Everybody was out trying to locate him. They finally ascertained that Sims was out of town.
While the search for Sims continued, investigators kept following their only other promising lead, the Art Avenue house that the robbers had broken into.
We started checking everything we could find out about the owner and his family. The girl that lived there had a boyfriend. We started checking him out. So we started from scratch with just basically an investigation on every person in the house.
The boyfriend, who had acted nervous during interviews, consented to a polygraph test. The polygraph examiner asked questions about the robbery and murder, while Special Agent Waddell observed. After an hour of questioning, the polygraph results were inconclusive.
Did you rob that bank?
The boyfriend could not be eliminated as a suspect. Special Agent Waddell knew he needed to re-examine the house and went back with a search warrant. This time, he returned with an FBI evidence response team. He was determined that a more thorough search would reveal a connection between the bank robbery and the break-in. The ERT technicians scoured the attic.
Got two guns here, two.
Behind a wallboard, they found a Tech-9 semi-automatic pistol and an AR-15 assault rifle, precisely the type of guns used in the crime. They were still loaded, and their serial numbers were intact. Special Agent Waddell proceeded to check if these were the same guns purchased by Jermaine Sims.
We wanted to verify that they were in fact the weapons that had been bought from the gun dealer and used in the bank robbery. So we called back to the office. We read off the serial number, make, and model of these weapons, and they were compared to the ATF firearms form.
They were the same weapons. A ballistics expert compared slugs recovered from the bank to slugs fired from the recovered AR-15. They matched, connecting that weapon to the fatal bank robbery. It seemed certain that Jermaine Sims had indeed bought the weapons used in the robbery and murder. Now, the FBI and Richmond police needed to find him. In Richmond, federal agents determined 2 weapons used in a deadly bank robbery were purchased by a man named Jermaine Sims. Agents could not find Sims, but a background check revealed he was receiving government assistance. They followed up on that lead. At the Social Services office, an administrator confirmed that Sims regularly came in to pick up food stamps. She flagged his name on their computers and agreed to page the FBI the next time the suspect showed up.
First name.
Yes.
Afternoon, ma'am. This is Special Agent Corson.
Agents went to the address listed on the ATF form and spoke to Sim's mother. She hadn't seen her son since she kicked him out the previous week. Days later, Richmond agents received a page from the Social Services Agency. Sims was there.
Okay, whatever. It's just a matter of pulling your check up. And
The administrator stalled Sims until the agents arrived. They hoped he didn't suspect anything. When the agents arrived, the suspect seemed calm.
Excuse me, sir. Special Agents FBI. I need you to come with me.
They asked Sims to come in for questioning. Reluctantly, he agreed.
Good and clear. Go ahead and thank her for me.
They took him to a nearby police station where investigators tried to get him to talk about the guns. But interviewing the suspect was no easy task, according to Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Altamari.
Sims was a difficult person to deal with. He was a person who was filled with hate and hostility. He didn't want to be there. He didn't want to certainly cooperate with us. We were dragging bits and bits of information out of him, and he was really only providing us information that we already knew. We were having a lot of trouble bringing him to the table, so to speak.
Sims denied any involvement in the crime, stating he was at his girlfriend's apartment at the time of the robbery.
Who lives there with him?
Over several hours, Altamari kept pressuring him until finally Sims admitted he had bought the AR-15 and the Tech-9 with the intent to sell them later for a profit. He said he stashed the weapons at a friend's house, a man named Ra, but claimed he couldn't remember the address.
A street called Main Street.
Instead, he gave directions.
Now, who else is this guy Ra?
The interview continued while Special Agent Wayne Waddell tried to confirm Sims' story.
Sims told us where this house was located and described the house to us. We went to the locations. We could not find the house.
Determined, Altamari confronted Sims with his deception.
Do you think you're dealing with a bunch of amateurs here?
But Sims maintained his story that he still knew nothing about the bank robbery.
You've already told me that.
By then, authorities had located Sims' girlfriend, who supported his alibi. But investigators had strong evidence connecting him to the crime.
You're going to jail for the rest of your life.
He was informed that he was under arrest for bank robbery.
There's nothing like the silence of a jail cell to focus somebody on their problem. And he had a huge problem. He had his name on the title to these weapons that were used in this robbery. And we thought that if we gave him a little time to think for himself, that he would eventually come to the conclusion that it was in his best interest to cooperate with us.
After a week of incarceration and repeated interviews, Sims decided to talk.
Now, tell me about the guns.
He said after he bought the guns, he left them with two friends, Rashid Jones and LaFawn Bobbitt. He still denied having any involvement in the robbery, but investigators continued to work on him.
He admitted that of course he knew that they had robbed the bank. He still claimed that he was surprised that they had used his guns to do it, and expressed his outrage that they would have done this to him and gotten him involved.
Sims said that after the robbery, Bobbitt and Jones came to his apartment wearing clothes he had never seen them in before. They told him about the botched robbery, the gunfight, and their escape. They explained that they had broken into the house on Art Avenue, choosing it at random. They stole some clothes and stashed their guns behind the wallboard in the attic. As they were leaving, Jones accidentally stepped through the ceiling. They then slipped out, avoiding the patrolling officers. They had the money with them, but it was stained red from the dye pack. Police records revealed that LaFawn Bobbitt had 11 prior convictions and was free on bond from charges related to grand theft auto. Rashid Jones had 7 prior convictions, including grand larceny, and was on parole. Investigators reduced the charge against Sims from bank robbery to conspiracy. Now, with the identity of the killers in hand, the real chase could begin. After a 1997 bank heist that left one teller dead, Richmond, Virginia authorities believed they had identified the gunman as LaFawn Bobbitt and Rashid Jones. They had no idea where to look for Jones, but they did set up surveillance at Bobbitt's last known address.
Been in it for a while. Yeah.
Assistant U.S. Attorney Ken Melson was determined to apprehend these men as quickly as possible.
We had to get these 2 cold-blooded killers off the street as soon as we can, so we would eliminate the possibility that they could do the same thing again and someone else would get killed. And yet we had a lot of work to do collecting the physical evidence, getting it analyzed by the lab.
They needed more time to build the federal case, but could not afford to have 2 killers on the loose.
Prosecutor's office in Henrico County to charge Bobbitt with the burglary, the breaking and entering of the Art Avenue address. With respect to Jones, he was in violation of his parole, so we got a warrant for a parole violation.
Special Agent Wayne Waddell received the go-ahead to bring in the fugitives on those charges.
We had 2 agents watching LaFawn Bobbitt's house. The 2 agents were Paul Messing and Eddie Alford.
Call it down.
And we finally get authorization to arrest LaFawn Bobbitt. I get hold of Messing and Alford. They tell me that Bobbitt has just left his house.
All right, thank you.
The agent told the surveillance team to follow Bobbitt, then headed off to back them up. The agents followed the suspect into town, where he boarded a bus. They kept in contact with Special Agent Waddell, updating him on their location.
302, 304.
Soon, Waddell caught up. They decided to arrest Bobbitt at the next bus stop.
Bus is right in front of me.
All right, 10-4, I'm getting ready to come around you right now.
Waddell pulled around front to get into position. The other agents pulled in behind. When the bus stopped, the agents were ready.
Come on, Bob, if you're under arrest for parole violation, put your hands up.
Within moments, suspect LaFawn Bobbitt was in custody. Investigators executed a search warrant on Bobbitt's home. In his bedroom, they discovered a manual for a .380 Lorson pistol, the same model used in the murder. They also found several spent .380 shells. For FBI Special Agent Eduardo Alford, this circumstantial evidence suggested it was Bobbitt who fired the fatal shot.
It was actually the weapon that one of the tellers was killed with. Finding that shell casing was very helpful as far as determining which one of the subjects or suspects might have had possession of this weapon on this particular day.
The FBI lab identified Bobbitt's fingerprints on items left at the bank by the robbers. The first evidence directly linking him to the crime. Technicians at the FBI's Question Documents Unit compared the boot impressions found at the bank with boots recovered from the Art Avenue house and from Bobbitt's home.
One of the latent footwear impressions was consistent with a boot that was left at the Art Avenue address. Another latent was found to be consistent with a boot found at Bobbitt's house at a later search. And so that circumstantially, again, not conclusively, but circumstantially placed Bobbitt and his apparel in that bank.
The boots found in the attic likely belonged to Bobbitt's alleged partner in the crime, Rashid Jones. Federal prosecutors now charged LaFawn Bobbitt with the bank robbery and murder, but investigators still needed to find Rashid Jones. 3 months after the crime, authorities received a tip from a store clerk. He reported a customer had attempted to pay with dye-stained bills. The clerk refused to accept them.
Mr. Jones had been in that particular area in the south end of Richmond trying to exchange some of this money. So the Fugitive Task Force pieced that information together, and they were really able to hone in on that particular area based on the proximity of this particular merchant's store.
The FBI focused on that neighborhood, working all of their contacts. The effort paid off.
The information that came in was from just a reliable source of information. Somebody that was aware of this crime and knew Mr. Jones and was able to pinpoint a location of where he was hiding.
Jones was staying in a run-down apartment building frequented by transients. Agents were able to obtain the cooperation of a man living there. The arrest was planned for 5 a.m. when Jones would likely be asleep. They called the location and spoke to their contact inside. He said Jones was there, sleeping, and he had a gun. Their contact also warned there were other people in the apartment, and most of the lights did not work. As the arrest team approached the building, they went through a final briefing, reviewing photos of their target. They anticipated a dangerous confrontation. Jones was armed, desperate, and surrounded by innocent bystanders. In 1997, the Richmond Fugitive Task Force SWAT unit closed in on Rashid Jones, suspected of bank robbery and murder. They'd received a tip that Jones was hiding out in an apartment. From their contact inside, they learned Jones was armed and most of the lights did not work. There were several innocent people in the apartment. The building was dark and foreign, complicating an already difficult challenge in which SWAT had to take down an armed fugitive while protecting innocent bystanders. The team decided to sneak up on Jones silently. They hoped he had not been tipped off. When they reached the target apartment, an agent phoned their contact inside.
FBI, we're here.
The contact was escorted out of the building. When they made it to the room where Jones was said to be sleeping, he was gone. So was his gun. Tension mounted as SWAT began searching the rest of the apartment.
Get your hands up, man. Get your hands up. Come on, get up. Get up.
They found and removed 2 other residents. Every room was cleared, except one, a bathroom.
Jones, you know you're in there. Come out. Put your hands up, Jones. That's him. Let's go.
To the team's relief, Jones was unarmed and surrendered without a fight. The manhunt was over.
Get on, sit up.
Agents searched for his weapon. They discovered it in a closet, its firing pin broken. Had the gun been functional, the arrest might not have gone so smoothly. Jones was immediately charged with probation violation and later for the bank robbery. On February 25, 1998, the trial of Rashid Jones and LaFawn Bobbitt began. But it would not be an easy case. Assistant U.S. Attorney Ken Melson and his prosecution team were unable to use any of the people in the bank as witnesses.
None of them could really testify for us because the guard was blind as a result of being wounded. One teller was dead. Another one had never had the opportunity to even turn around to see anything. And a third employee was unable to testify because she didn't see anything. She was under a desk during most of the robbery.
Melson found a way to deal with the lack of witnesses by commissioning a digital recreation of the crime.
We had to stand in for them digitally and show the jury what happened inside that bank. We were the witnesses' voice to the jury during the trial so that they could be involved and experience the agony of the victims, experience the moment of the bank robbery. And that would give them not only the true feeling of what went on in the bank, but the true carnage and intent of the defendants.
After hearing 6 days of testimony, the jury convicted both gunmen on all charges. Assistant U.S. Attorney Nicholas Altamari.
In the trial, they sat there smug as all get out. And it wasn't until after they were convicted that you could really see them start to worry, because then it was about them. Then they were worried.
Bobbitt and Jones were each sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Jermaine Sims, who purchased 2 of the weapons used in the robbery, was convicted on conspiracy, accessory before the fact of murder, and several weapons violations. He, too, was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. As the victims and their families continue to heal, they and the city of Richmond know that Jones, Bobbitt, and Sims will never be a threat to anyone again.